my brother might be dead. It's not the cannons I'm worried about, it's the salamanders. And I have so many questions. I have some disappointing news. Hello friends and welcome to the vlog. I posted a dragon TBR video that was initially going to just be the beginning portion of this weekly vlog, and then I kept talking and I just realized that if I put that into a vlog, given how long my vlogs have been leading towards, it's going to just be a hot minute of me talking about dragons, which, you know, I love, but I also didn't want to bore anyone. So we have quite a few things on my upcoming TBR, current TBR, however you want to think about it, the things that I'm interested in. I am currently in the middle of reading both Darkwind and Dawn of Onyx, so I'm going to start on focusing on those two. The issue that I know I'm already going to have is that neither of those are super dragon focused. However, there are touches of them that are dragon, at least in Dawn of Onyx. And then this is very upside down. I know that in Darkwind, so far it's only a touch. However, it has been recommended to me that it is a dragon book, so I'm curious to see how that continues to develop. I'm currently listening to Darkwind on audio. Dawn of Onyx I picked up a couple weeks ago. My brain has just not been braining, and I just needed to read some romance and come back to that. So it's time for me to come back to that. I did get 30% of the way in. I feel like I need to skim through the beginning a little bit, to be honest. However, I really did like the setup in that book so far. I am obsessed. Also, Promise of Peridot is coming out next week, and I would like to catch up with that before that releases. As far as Darkwind, everything that's happening in that book, I'm having a good time. I would like to at some point pick that up on my Kindle, just because the audiobook isn't necessarily my favorite. However, my brain is really in an audiobook moment. Like, the brain capacity, again, is just not really there at the moment. So yeah, I will likely continue listening to that audiobook, and we're just gonna see where it goes. Up until this point, dragons have been briefly mentioned in terms of like dragon armor, and how dragon armor is now hard to get a hold of because dragons have basically vanished off into the night. So I'm curious to see how much that continues to develop. Anyways, hi, welcome to the vlog. I'm so excited for this week. I hope that I find some good books. Let's get into it. Let's just give a quick little very intro, currently reading a very intro Dawn of Onyx thoughts. As I'm only 32 pages in, so far I like the concept of our main character. She is a healer who's got some weird magic going on. There's also fae in these lands. I'm putting my theory out there that she's going to be fae. So we have our main character, Arwen. She's living in the Amber Kingdom in deep wartime. No one knows why the Kingdom of Onyx has attacked Amber, given that Amber is pretty weak. It doesn't have a lot of resources. It's not one of the hot places that one would think that Onyx would need to take out, because Onyx is like the powerhouse, and they're just kind of, you know, kicking the dog wads down. No one really knows why that's happening, but regardless, Arwen is living in that time. She's a healer, and so she, you know, has got some super secret weird healer magic. She's not a witch, and we all know that she's not a witch, but she's definitely like, I don't know. Am I something else? I don't know. What are the odds that she is in fact something else? I don't know. Anyways, so her best friend slash her brother's best friend that she apparently has been dating, they have both been enlisted into the war because basically all of the men are gone at this point, and they're about to start recruiting women. She's kind of having this inner monologue of, I don't think I could be a soldier. Like, I don't think I could kill somebody. I don't think I'm adventurous enough. I don't think I ever want to leave this village that we're in. I don't think I could ever leave my family. Like, I don't think that I could be that girl. But her sister, she's got a younger sister, and right now she's kind of giving Prim like Hunger Games vibes, which is kind of fun, but in a different way. I think it's just because it's like a younger, super blonde younger sister. However, she's different in the fact that she is very much so like adventurous and brave and outgoing, and Arwen is scared. Arwen knows that her younger sister would get herself into trouble, and kind of boldly make her way into battle. And yeah, so their mom is also very sick at the moment, so Arwen is kind of the main caretaker of the family up until they're having dinner and they're talking about how they need to reconcile the fact that their brother, they haven't heard from him, and I think almost 2 years, in between like a year and 2 years, somewhere in that range. They said it's been a year, but then she also said it's almost 2 years. So for some large stretch of time, their brother has been gone and hasn't written them at all. So they're kind of having this come to Jesus moment as a family, saying, hey, brother might be dead. Arwen absolutely refuses to give in to the fact that he could be gone until he in fact shows up at the front door. Oh, rather worse from where, come to find out he is on the run from some Onyx soldiers and has secured passage for the family to basically leave and run off to another kingdom, right off into the sunset, away from the war, where they're most likely going to lose the war, but then also be called into battle and get killed as soldiers, much less be killed. Basically, things aren't going well, so they're gonna run off into the distance, and they end up leaving their mother's medicine. So Arwen goes back and then runs into the soldiers, and that's where I have left off. I'm very excited to see where this story goes. I feel like it has really good potential, but I also feel like it's got some of the standard trappings of a very typical fantasy storyline, in which you kind of are hinted at that she's not a normal, standard, regular human. She's definitely got something weird going on with her, and also she's now, like, she's a healer that doesn't want to be a hero. That reluctant hero scenario combined with the healer that just doesn't want to hurt people, who is also going to be reluctant to hurt people. That very much so those are very standard themes, right? So I'm intrigued to see how this story changes some of those things. From what I have heard about this book, it gives very much so standard fantasy up until there are some twists, and that predictability, you might say, shifts. So I'm excited to see where that goes. Hello friends, so I just did Readings Friends with Tori and I had so stinking much fun. It was so much fun. I'm laughing because I'm very curious to go back and see like what my face was doing that entire time, because I literally like 478, 10 pages. I'm so glad that math was not any harder than it was until the end of Dawn of Onyx, and yeah, first of all, this book read so much faster than I thought it was going to. I figured I would finish it sometime today, but I wasn't sure that I would finish it like during sprints. We did 2 45-minute sprints and then 1 40-minute sprint. So, but at that point I was like 130 pages in or so. But for me to read that much in that little time, I'll take it. 2 things that we need to address. Well, one of the 2 things that I wanted to address, not being the fact that I did end up annotating some of this. I need to go back and transfer some of my highlights. I didn't end up actually writing in this. I did leave a couple of sticky notes, but I also was like, the pen that I had sitting at my desk here was not It's like one of the like ones that smudge real easy. So I didn't actually write anything, but I did tab a whole bunch. And I wasn't anticipating this book to be like a giggly fun time for 90% of it. There was so much, like I knew that there was banter, but the banter that was had was like fun, goofy, silly, fun time. And like it was funny. Completely without context. There's at one point where salamanders mentioned as like something to be afraid of, and the whole time I was like, it was scary, a salamander. And then you proceed to get the next page and they're actually described very terrifying. So like, yeah, it was scary salamander. But it was just like so out of pocket and random. It's not the cannons I'm worried about. It's the salamanders. Like, it was fun. So overall, I know that I have 10 pages left and I know that I could just finish the 10 pages, but I'm not going to do that apparently. We get their first meeting from his perspective. Amazing. Yeah. Okay, so I just went back and read the I finished the book, and then I went back and read the chapters from Kane's point of view, and things make sense. Things make sense. I remembered the scene of them meeting. The fact that he was like, yeah, she was kind of entitled. I love that. Anyways, this is a thing that happened to me. I'm gonna be very intentionally vague about this book because I feel like knowing as absolutely little about this book as possible and about like everything in this book is what makes it interesting and what makes it so like shocking for me. And if you go into this with like just vibes, no like brain, if you try to think through it and figure it out, you're gonna figure it out, and that's kind of lame. So like but this book does kind of feel like this soft intro to a bigger series, which is what it is. So I think for it doing its job, I think it did its job. I am, however, so interested in not only the dragon element, because obviously that's what we're here to talk about in this vlog, but also the plot and like the world and how all of that continues to develop in Promise of Peridot. So I think if you pick up this book expecting to get dragons, you're really not going to get it, but I'm curious to see how much in the rest of the series as it goes, how much more we're going to get. But at the same time, like if you know, you know, I'm curious to see like what that level is. Like, I don't think this is really going to satisfy a dragon fix for you if you're like really looking for a story about dragons. I knew going into this that the dragons weren't going to be a very big part, and I kind of hesitated to even read this for this vlog, but I was already in the middle of reading it, so I just figured we'd go ahead and read it. There was one scene in the beginning in which there's a traveling scene and they ride the dragon, so there's your dragon reference. There's another scene in which the dragon's mentioned, and then you get more information on it later. So definitely book 2. I am curious to see how that comes about. Because there was so little in the way of buildup and like just general mentions of dragons, I was kind of like, are we even gonna get anything about that? And we did get information, and I have so many questions. So I'm low-key debating getting the audiobook for Promise of Peridot and reading that and just like binge reading the whole series. However, I am also in the middle of a book that I started a really long time ago and then DNF'd it because it just wasn't really interesting at the time, and we're circling back now. I am just past the point at which I previously left off, and I feel like now that I'm starting to get some new from what I previously remembered, it's been more interesting. I'm actually surprised with how much I remembered from the plot of this book, which I felt like whenever I very first read it, I wasn't understanding a single thing that was happening, and now I'm like, I feel like I remember all of this. So that's interesting. I feel like I am literally nowhere in terms of progress in this book. I'm on chapter 17, page 184, if that is of any interest to you. So in this book, you're gonna have more like fey dragons, brief mentionings, just a little skosh of dragon, okay? This book is more, we have gotten brief little mentions and brief little like, I don't know, I feel like we've had exposure to the dragons in this book, but at the same time, I don't really understand them and like what they're all about. We do have a looming evil situation in which the nameless one is kind of floating above being, you know, nameless and, you know, evil. So I'm definitely interested in where this was going. I will say, however, listening to it, the audiobook, I think, is a lot easier than reading the physical version of it like I was doing previously, because I'm finally at the point in which I left off. I'm starting to now get interested, but again, I was surprised with how much I remembered. That I felt like I was slogging through it yet again. So I'm hoping that it gets better for me. I'm curious to see what the magic system, I'm still real confused and don't really have much direction as far as where the world magic building is going. Like, I get the politics, but I don't understand the magic very much. We've had the Priory briefly mentioned, but we haven't had full explanation of the role in the Priory as well as the abilities of all of that. Yeah, I'm interested where this is going. I'm not necessarily like driven to read this immediately, so like I could definitely put this down if I feel like it, but at the same time I have seen so many good things about this book and I'm still interested. So we'll see where this goes. I'm gonna sit down and do my reading journal, I think, and listen to this audiobook, but I might switch to Promise of Peridot. I make no promises. Happy Sunday. I don't even know where to begin this update because I have some disappointing news. I so aggressively wanted to love this book and I really felt like I was going to like it, given that, like, what is not to like about a Sapphic Romance with Dragons? I'm gonna DNF it. Let me check what page I'm actually at. Hold, please. So I made it to the very end of chapter 28, so 316 pages in this book. I think the reason that I'm bored is that I just didn't connect to the characters. We've had some pretty dramatic things happening. The peril that has occurred, I clearly very much so want to like this book, and let me try to back up and explain specifically the things that have occurred, and I want to leave this spoiler free. I do want to quickly touch on the dragon element of this book. It's really interesting to see how there's basically one origin story, but then all of these different groups of people have interpreted that original event differently, so that's definitely interesting. And seeing how the dragons play into that, you've got people that think that they're gods. You've got people that think that they're descended from this big bad evil that is going to completely ruin everything, therefore the dragons themselves are bad. So it's really interesting to see in particular those differences, but specifically what I was enjoying, one of the characters who has the most proximity to dragons, she regards them so highly. So she is this orphan girl who thinks nothing of herself, who's interacting with this higher power. I thought that that side of it was really interesting. The other side of that, the group of people that think all of dragons are evil, you've got several different viewpoints points. I initially was really interested in Sabran and Iyad. However, things in Sabran's storyline are moving along so quickly and in a way that's not really convincing to me. Like, I feel like one moment we're this character, and then the next moment she's completely committed and emotionally involved in this scenario, that you're not getting to see that gap, this transition from her being reluctantly introduced to the scenario, moving on to her being so emotionally wrapped up in another person. It's hard to be invested in this relationship because you've seen her not want to be there, and you've not seen anything in between. When certain things happen with this relationship, I didn't care because the last thing I knew was that she was reluctant to be in this relationship anyways, if that makes sense. So I just feel like the pacing is kind of what's doing it. We're skipping around, but we're skipping around to different parts, and the parts that I needed in the middle was the part that I needed to be invested, and I didn't really get that. I feel like we're told that certain characters are besties, they're best friends, they would do anything for each other. And then when things happen to threaten either of those two characters, I don't necessarily really care because I was never really shown that friendship, I was just told about the friendship. And I feel like there's a lack of character development in terms of we know things about the characters, but we just don't see things about the characters. I feel like the world building and the political development that's happening is just so, it feels so vague to me. So in my research, if you will, of different recaps, just to kind of make sure that I was fully understanding what was happening here, because I felt like I was, but at the same time I was like, surely there's something missing here. Come to find out there wasn't much missing. It was just the way that I was interacting with the story. I know that people so love this book and I want to be those people so bad, and I just am not. But in watching different YouTube vlogs and recaps and people's opinions and reviews on this book, a lot of them had the exact same thing. And if they didn't get invested by around the 200 page mark, they spent the whole next 600 pages not feeling invested. And I just have other things to do, to be honest. I have other books I want to read, and I have other life things I want to do. I don't think I'll come back to this book really ever again, given that this is my second time now coming back to it. My first go round, I made it 180 pages in and wasn't connected still, and I'm now past that point and I'm still not connected. And also it's been a hot minute, maybe a year or so, I don't know, I'd have to look up whenever I very first tried reading this. Given that nothing's really changed on that front, I don't want to slog through another 600 pages when I am not invested now, and I don't, watching other people's reviews and things, if they weren't invested at this point, they'd never really got that invested. So I'm just gonna save myself the time. I think what I might do is look up spoilers for this, to be fully honest with you, because I don't feel like the writing style is for me. And if you're 300 pages into a book, that's kind of the indication that it's not gonna be for you. But I do, I'm curious as to what's happening. I just don't really care to read this specific text, so I may or may not look up spoilers and then go try to read A Day of Fallen Night later, because I so desperately want to love it a lot. I've now been recording this clip for 15 minutes now, trying to justify DNFing it, and that's how hard DNFing this is for me. And yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. I feel like enough said is occurring. Yeah, that's that on that. Yeah, anyways, I do have a second reading update for you that's better, but still not great. So part of the main reason that I was obviously because I've heard so much hype about Priory, part of the reason I really wanted to get to it is because one of my goals this year is working on my physical TBR. I feel better having had read that book. I've touched it. It's not just sitting on my shelf. So I really consider that a win. While I didn't necessarily like it and I am DNFing it, it's no longer just sitting there. Of me never have gotten to it, so I support that. In that vein, House of Dragons by K.A. Lind. I decided to pick this up. This was actually on my 23 books in 23 challenge, and then I just never got to it. I haven't gotten to the dragon element in this book, and while I talk about that, the other thing about the dragon elements in Priory, I felt like I was so busy focusing on the politics and all the other things that I couldn't really focus on the dragons that were happening. The dragon was fun, but I couldn't even get to the dragon because everything else, I just wasn't getting along with the character development. I think it was a maid. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyways, this book, I am a literal 4 chapters into this, so I've literally just barely started. However, this is a YA fantasy. I really like how this book starts off. You're starting off with a good bit of action, so you're figuring out kind of what you're getting into fairly early on. There is going to be some elemental magic in this book as well, and I'm so excited about that. So I think this book in particular has really, really great potential. However, I'm kind of nervous about it given some of the writing it feels YA, but some of it is a little cringy. The cuss word of choice is gods every 2 seconds. In 40 pages, it's been thrown out like 4 or 5 times. And that repetition, I just hope that doesn't bleed into other things. Like, if that's all there is, I can handle that. But literally chapter 4 starts with gods, Kerrigan breathed out. So here's chapter 4. He says, gods. You flip the page, and on this page, it literally says gods. Do you see that? So I'm just hoping that levels out a bit and that repetition doesn't continue. She's like seen some visions, which is kind of interesting. And we had our big bad male love interest that I'm assuming is going to be the love interest anyways. He's popped in, we'll say. So we're 40 pages in. There are some questionably red flags that I just want to close my eyes and not look at. However, I have high hopes. So since I have DNF. I'm so upset that I'm DNFing. I so wish that I wasn't, but I'm just going to do it and it's going to be fine. But because I am leaving off on one audiobook, I have another audiobook. Given that my library hold suddenly became available, and I kind of took that as my sign that there are other things that I want to be reading at this time. His Majesty's Dragon. I've heard nothing but good things about this book, and I'm just so stinking curious about it. So I'm gonna start the audiobook. We'll see how everything goes. Just got back from the symphony, which sounds so bougie and fancy, but really we got free tickets. So the long story is that I play in the Lubbock concert band, which is a fun time in and of itself. I fully recommend picking up your childhood hobbies in adulthood. Just saying. Anyways, they gave us free tickets for their concert tonight. I don't know, I'm not complaining because I got a free Friday evening out. And it was fun. Because I have just been sitting so long, I need to be like getting up and moving and grooving. However, it is 10 p.m. So I need to get my act together. I washed all of my bedding today, which is great. However, it now has to go back on. So I think that by the time that I actually get my bed made, I'm going to be ready to go to sleep. So I'm gonna continue listening to my Temeraire audiobook. I just want to give a quick little reading update. If you're a fan of How to Train Your Dragon, specifically you're a fan of Toothless, might I recommend Temeraire. He is just a cute, innocent little puppy dog kitten all wrapped up into one innocent being. I love him. If you're a fan of like the cutesy kind of dragon, you're gonna get some of those vibes from him, even though he's still a war machine. And I call that balance. If you've not heard of this book in this series in particular, essentially it is I'm sorry, Gingy's running around. You're just gonna have to listen to her caller. It's essentially a reimagination of if Napoleon had dragons. This book basically asks the question, where in society and where in the general war times would dragons fit? How would they operate? How would the layers of command work? How tactically how that would work as well? It's a very interesting reimagination, basically is what it is. It's interesting because it feels really thought out, and there's an entire world that is in fact built around this idea. So this book opens up, you've got Lawrence, who he's just a little homie living his best little life in the Navy. He's got a ship, things are going well for him. He's got his whole life planned out ahead of him. He knows that once he gets back home, he's got a girl waiting for him that he's probably gonna marry. He's saving his money. He's setting himself up for the rest of his life. As the way of the world goes, especially in fiction, whenever things look too good, they are in fact too good. And the fact that they take a French ship, such ferocious sounds for such a little guy. He takes a French ship, and on that ship there happens to be a dragon egg. Weird, right? So dragons in this world, once they hatch, you have a very short window to harness them, is how they call it. Basically, you have a very short window to you have a very short window from when they hatch to essentially convince them and get a hold of them and wrangle them so that they're not feral or not subservient to you. So they kind of take bets on the ship who's going to have to now sacrifice their life essentially to be a dragon rider. Because there are so few dragons in the world, once there is a dragon, they kind of have to give up their lives and like be full send, thank you, in service in whatever tactical fashion that will be in. So nobody really wants to do it because they all kind of want to go on and live their lives after this, right? Like, who wouldn't? Thank you. You're so a nice guy. So they kind of draw lots as to who is going to have to be the one to get it. So it goes to the young guy on the ship who fails and doesn't do really well. And so Lawrence kind of takes charge accidentally, and now he has a dragon. So he panics and asks if he can name the dragon, and the dragon's like, yeah. And he's like, wait, you said yes? And so he now has to name the dragon, and his very creative mind just goes straight for the ship's name. And I can respect the panic that happened in that moment. And the book just kind of chronicles this BB dragon growing up and Lawrence being a little softy, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of his life and how to kind of abandon the idea of what he thought that his life was going to be, but then also committing to this other creature and like learning about this creature and adopting a little baby dragon. It's just like a super cute, fun time, honestly. I am listening to the audiobook. Like I said, it's very much so old British guy telling me a story, which is kind of weird, but it's also kind of fitting for the story itself. And I am having a good time. I'm not like having the best time necessarily, but I'm definitely having a good time. So anyways, this book is just kind of like a silly, goofy, happy, fun time where there's a little baby dragon who is now growing up into an adult dragon. But at the same time, he's just kind of like a puppy dog at heart. It's very much so giving Abraxas from Throne of Glass. If you liked Abraxas from Throne of Glass and you wanted more of him, maybe look into this. He doesn't like stop and smell the roses kind of thing, but he definitely likes to go swim and just have a fun little splishy, splashy good time. And I love that for him. So I'm going to continue listening to this audiobook. I expect it's going to continue much the same silly, goofy, fun time fashion and maybe put this dog down. But like, who would let him go? Not me, apparently. The thing about Oliver is that he's a very cute and very sweet boy when he wants to be. And when he doesn't want to be, he is a chaos, evil demon. So I take the fun, happy moments when I can get them. Hello, friends, and happy Sunday. I have spent the last... It is 7 p.m. Far too long, slowly sinking further and further into my couch. I discovered that my Kindle stand actually will connect to the back of my couch, and I am never gonna move ever again. Anyways, I happen to have finished. I finished one book last night, and then I finished 2 books today. So let's get into it. I feel like this week I have just been reading nonstop. And it's not even that this week I have been reading, it's really just been like this weekend, and with the mixing in of audiobooks and all those good things. I finished a book Sunday. I really don't read a whole lot during the week apparently, but then on the weekends I kind of catch up. So Sunday I finished Dawn of Onyx, and then now I'm finishing more books. So it's just kind of, you know, everything all, it equals out in the end. But moral of the story, I have some reading updates for you all. I'm both excited and a little minor bit nervous to get into because I have, unfortunately, yet another book that I did finish this one. I probably should have DNF'd it. House of Dragons, for me, I just felt like this book was doing a little bit too much, and I felt like we were just going in a lot of directions, and I felt like we had a female main character who had all kinds of power and had everything just kind of magically work out for her, and it was just a lot happening. It was a fun book, and I think if I had read this at a different time, I might have liked this better, but for me right now, it just didn't do what I think it was supposed to do, and I think partially that is because I think I'm in a bit of a reading slump. Yeah, I think I'm kind of officially in a reading slump. I don't think it's really necessarily a reading slump, but I think it's just like a fantasy reading slump in which all I want to do is read Wild Love by Elsie Silver. So next week I'm definitely going to be doing that. However, for this week and for this book this time, by the time I got to the end, I was just skimming it and I just wasn't necessarily interested, and I just felt like we had all of these plot lines and they were gangs and there was elemental magic, but then there was also a spiritual realm thing, and then there was a dragon, and there were dragon bonds at the very end, and there was this contest, but then there was like, it was a lot. And I feel like for me, if I were to have read this book maybe a couple months on the line, I might have liked it better. But unfortunately for me right now, it just didn't quite hit the way that I wanted to. So I think this was totally wrong time, wrong book. So I'm not really sure what synopsis I gave on this book earlier because I don't think I really did. Essentially, House of Dragons. The House of Dragons is basically think of it like a school training academy situation in which all of the orphaned, cast out, exiled kids, kids of families who can't afford them, so their families give them up kind of thing. So there are kids that are essentially brought up in this school. There are dragons around, and all of the unbonded dragons, like, you get to fly around on them. So you do get a couple of flying scenes, which is fun. Our main character, Kerrigan, is half fae, half human, and so she was cast out from her family because she was a disgrace. This book goes into racism a lot, which was interesting, actually, I thought, because in this world, there are a lot of think like Harry Potter. You got your muggles and your wizards. If you're not a full-blooded, pure-blooded wizard, you ain't it. And in this book, very much so the same thing. If you're not like a full-blooded fae, there are a lot of fae in the world who are going to attempt to take care of you, and not in a good way. So in this book, we follow Kerrigan, who has met that fate. We're kind of watching her as she is supposed to be graduating from this training program. And at the end of this training program, all of these students are supposed to be picked by one of the 12, what are they technically, they're tribes of this world. So what happens is that they get to the end of the ceremony, Kerrigan's the last one, and then she doesn't get picked. But at the end of this like selection process, what have you, there is a dragon tournament in which people from the society outside of the training program will come in and compete in this tournament to become a dragon rider. So you've got kind of this element of a competition, but at the same time there's also like random street fighting, and like there's just a lot of things happening here. Given that I kind of was seeing some of those call outs early on, I probably should have DNF'd it a little bit sooner or at all. And I feel like this week, as someone who has not DNF'd a single thing all year up until this last week, I feel like it is both a little, obviously it's a little weird, but I feel like it's just my friendly reminder that if I am not into the book, or there's just some things that I'm already seeing from the get-go that just feel like they may or may not work for me, I need to just call it and not spend as much time. Like, at the end of the day, this was a fun book and I felt like there was some fun things happening, but I was skimming by the end of it, and while it was fun, there are a million other things that I could have been reading that might have been more fun. So I feel like this has just been a good week to just practice the realization that sometimes it's okay to just DNF and move on. So, update number 1 for you. Update number 2 is that I did finish His Majesty's Dragon, and that book was so fun. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with that series. It very much so left off at a point where it could be read like a standalone, in my opinion. There's definitely more that could develop. Obviously, it's a 9-book series. There's definitely a lot more that it could develop into, but I don't feel like I urgently need to read the rest of the series. However, if you are looking for a fun, cutesy dragon book in which the stakes are high, but they're not like super high. It's definitely historical fantasy as opposed to fantasy. These dragons are kind of just like ships in which they have a whole crew of people on them as they're just going along with their lives. And it was just interesting to read about that world and that system and seeing how Naomi Novik like placed all of these ideas. So I thought that was an interesting book to read, and I was glad that I read it. Last but not least, I did finally finished Darkwind. I started reading the book a very hot minute ago, and I don't know. I guess I just haven't been in the mood for fantasy as much lately. I think now I really just need to read some romance just to kind of reset my fantasy brain because the brain was braining. But anyways, I put that book down for a book club read and I just didn't get back to it, but I finally got back to it and I read like over half of that book today, and it was just fun. Like, I felt like there were a lot of different plot lines happening, but it wasn't so much that it was just like we're combining all of. It was a major thing that I felt about this book was that we were combining so many different elements and storylines, and we had this female main character who had all of this power, and there were stakes, but at the same time, at the end of the day, she got everything that she wanted and was kind of like, it was kind of Mary Sue ended up, to be honest with you. Whereas with Darkwind, there were definitely some high stakes elements, and there were definitely a lot of storylines going on, but it wasn't so much that you were just like bouncing all over the place and you're just like, what are we even doing here? So Darkwind, I really enjoyed. I will be hopefully reading book 2 in that series next week to finally catch up with the book club on Instagram that we're doing. However, as far as the dragons, one thing I didn't mention in this book, you get to see some of the dragons and those characters, but I assume that you're going to get more of the specific bonded magic and all of those things moving into book 2. However, with Darkwind, there were some brief little mentionings here and there about dragons, and I know that there are more dragons. However, book 1 basically had nothing in it, so I definitely wouldn't read that for dragon lore either. So ultimately, the books that I chose this week were not the best picks on my behalf. And that's kind of, you know, how it goes sometimes. Did I find my perfect dragon book in this vlog? No, however, I definitely enjoyed the digging into some of the dragon lore and getting to see a bunch of different aspects, because I'm not really sure where in Darkwind we're going with it, but like in this book you're getting to see these dragons just like kind of chilling around. They get to ride them here and there. In His Majesty's Dragon or the Temeraire series, you're getting to see these dragons almost kind of function like either ships or like planes. They very much so feel like a plane that just happens to be, you know, alive. So that's cool. Like there's an entire crew of people on this dragon, which is interesting. And then earlier this week we read, well, we each attempted to read A Priory of the Orange Tree, which it was interesting to see how those dragons kind of played into the religion of the world and seeing how those dragons and the opinions on dragons really divided out the different factions in the world. And then moving into A Dawn of Onyx, you get kind of like your Fae version. So it was interesting to see all of these different versions of dragons kind of come together to see the many approaches that you can take in terms of both reading and writing about them. So I had a great time this week. I definitely am still on the hunt for my top tier, god tier, lives rent free in my head dragon book, and hopefully we'll find it. It's out there somewhere. I really believe it's out there somewhere. I hope it's out there somewhere. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have a really great week so far, depending on where in the week you and I are seeing each other. I'm hoping it's been a great one for you. Definitely do subscribe and stick around to my channel. Go ahead and like this video and comment down below none other than the dragon emoji. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are, and I will catch you in the next one.